What's up, guys? It's Rob here, and we need to talk about the stock formerly known as SPRT, support.com, now known as Greenidge Generation Holdings, ticker symbol GREE, because there has been some insane action going on with it this morning. Crazy action. It's down 50%. So let's take a look at the chart. And first of all, we're going to be looking at the old SPRT chart because it's actually nice what they've done. They've left this up for us on Thinkorswim, on TD Ameritrade's Thinkorswim, and you can look back at the history of SPRT and just get a backstory for what this stock has been doing. So it's nice to kind of have that continuity between SPRT and the ticker symbol that is now GREE. And you can see the SPRT ended trading around 8 o'clock at $10.98. Now it is trading as GREE, and that started around 6 this morning at $91.06. And this lines up exactly with what we predicted, or rather what I researched for the last video, that each share of SPRT would become 0.115 shares of GREE, and that meant that the stock price should 8.7x, just about, right? You know, there's obviously some leeway on that because when stocks switch from one day to the next, you know, sometimes they can change somewhat dramatically by bar. So that doesn't actually account for, you know, exactly what the stock price was meant to be, but it was very close, this prediction. Now, obviously, you can see that this stock has been dropping dramatically, down about 50%. We were down to $45, so over 50% at one point. We started at 91, and we've just been tanking all the way down to 45. And this is basically as many people are fleeing this stock because they don't understand what's going on. And they're scared because they now have far fewer shares of this new ticker symbol than they had of SPRT, which they loved. They were the Spartans. And now they have GREE. It doesn't even mean anything to them. And they don't know anything about the short interest. And really, you can't really blame them because they can't actually know anything about the short interest, because even if you have a subscription to Ortex, which I do, it costs about $80 a month. This is pretty much one of the best subscription services for stock analysis that you can get. It has basically no interest or no information on GREE just because this thing is too new, right? This thing started trading at 6 and it's only 10 right now. So it's only been out for about 4 hours. So obviously, you know, they're still working on getting this information up. But if you look at the short interest, you can't actually see what it is because they haven't posted anything for it yet. And as soon as they do, I will make a video to update you guys and let you know what this is looking like, just in case you guys are still in this stock and are curious about that. So if you're interested in seeing that, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you can be informed in a timely manner. So what we're looking at with GREE is actually a massive sell-off that's due to a big lack of information and a lot of people getting scared and not being too enticed to be in this stock. And honestly, quite a few people were probably looking at SPRT as maybe a good buy around this price, just because it had sank so much and there was the potential for a bounce. But now it's actually, if you do the math and recalculate what SPRT's price would be, it's probably closer to $5. Which is actually very low. And this is getting to the point where shorts may want to start buying back their position, because GREE, you know, started the day at $90, and that accounted for SPRT price of around 11. So if you do the math, that's about 50% decrease. So SPRT actually has decreased, if this thing was still SPRT, by about 50%, and that means that it should be around $5.50 right here, which is actually fairly low. It's right. It's you know, definitely far below where anyone was really shorting this thing to a significant extent, and a lot of people were shorting this. A lot of institutions rather were shorting this around, you know, the $10, $20, $30, $40 range. So this is really a point where we could be looking at a bounce back, and obviously, you know, if you want to get out of this stock, by all means, go ahead. I'm not trying to convince anyone either way. I'm just giving you my opinion that we have seen a massive drop in this stock price. And if I were holding it, which I'm not, I would probably not be selling it. That's just my personal opinion. I think that, you know, this is far too big of a drop and in too short a time frame. I mean, it was only over the course of 4 hours that we dropped 50% in stock price. And I think it's fairly obvious that if we dropped 50% in stock price, that not only were people not covering their short positions, were institutions not covering their shorts, but they were likely adding more. And they were actually able to do this, as I predicted in my other video, because they might get a little bit greedy as there's more, they might get a little bit greedy because there is a larger market cap for this stock. And it actually seems less risky to them to be shorting this since SPRT has been merged with GREE. When you look at Ortex the next time, the short interest might be much lower, right? The short interest percent of free float, but the actual short interest shares will likely be much high. Well, I mean, technically higher. It'll be higher value-wise, right? But much lower share count-wise, since SPRT was kind of condensed. 8.7 shares were condensed into 1 share of GREE. So it'll be lower share count-wise, but much higher value-wise, other than the fact that this thing just dropped 50%. But I do expect that if you actually did the math and accounted for how many shares were converted into GREE shorts, that there would be a higher number than you would expect, because I think that probably a lot of shorts are shorting today, trying to push this thing down as they now have more of a buffer zone, right? And for every short shared, it's not nearly as much of an impact on the short interest percent of free float, since the free float is now much higher, since this is the merger of two companies. Now, what I expect with GREE in the future, there are some potential catalysts that I could see moving this thing up, because Greenidge Generation Holdings is actually, as I said in my other video, involved in Bitcoin mining and power generation. So I think that any big fluctuations, particularly upwards in the price of Bitcoin, could really impact this stock and move it up. And if there is still a high short percentage at that time, then that could really serve to boost up the stock price and could potentially be a catalyst for a squeeze. So I think this stock got a lot more volatile and, at the very least, a lot more interesting, because with support.com, obviously the underlying business model wasn't that big of a factor regarding the stock price, right? People didn't care about what they did. They just cared about the high short percentage and high number of shares shorted. But with this stock, there really is an underlying business model that could somewhat dramatically affect the stock price, right? Shorts aside. And that the effect that could have on the stock price could actually end up leading to a short squeeze. And obviously, we'll have to wait for the real data to come in because we don't actually know what this short interest percent of free float is. Maybe through some miraculous means, the shorts are exiting all of their shares right now. Likely, as many investors, are probably dumping their shares because they see this thing. They're very disappointed with it. Imagine if your SPRT shares were just all of a sudden worth $5.50 instead of the $10 that they had ended the day with yesterday. That's basically what a lot of investors are going through right now. So it's completely understandable that some people are selling out of this thing. However, in my opinion, if I were holding these shares, this is such a dramatic drop that it's almost not worth selling. It's just waiting to see if there's some kind of bounce, if shorts are going to start covering, because I do think it's likely that once we get to this point on the graph where, we're around 550, this is much below what we saw over here. This is around $7, $8, where a lot of people were probably shorting, even higher than that. So shorts really could begin to take some profits. Obviously, this thing could continue to get pushed down. It's just been dumping so far from all we've seen today. And that's just what's been going on. But in my opinion, it's a bit too big of a loss at this point to really justify even selling. I mean, I can't imagine how much capital people have left in this, because it's unlikely that they went all in on this just yesterday and only suffered the 50% loss. Typically, when I suffer a loss this big, if I've held on through this point, typically I like to, cut my losses somewhat early. But if I've held to this point, then I may as well just add this to the collection, in my opinion. That's what I typically do. I don't encourage anyone to do that if they don't want to. If they need that capital for something else, then by all means. I just think that this thing doesn't seem to have that much more downwards potential, just because shorts have already gotten it to a point where they can make a profit, and they're probably going to want to start covering at some point, right? They don't want to short this thing to $1. I mean, they could, but then obviously all the shorts would try covering at once, because that's pretty much as cheap as it's going to get. So it just doesn't make sense to me to short this thing too much lower. It's already much lower than SPRT was before the short squeeze. And just from a fundamental standpoint, it doesn't seem to make much sense. So that's really what I'm here to talk about today. Obviously, I will be making more videos on GREE in the future, especially as we get that short data. But actually, hold on, I just remembered one last thing that I did want to show you. On Google Trends, you can see that SPRT is the blue line on this, and GREE is the red line. Now, in the past, GREE was far less popular, and even now, far fewer people are searching for GREE than are SPRT. The blue line is still above the red, but that might change and will likely change probably over the course of tomorrow or the next day. So you're going to want to keep an eye out on this graph, because this is potentially going to indicate when we could be seeing some kind of pump, right? If we actually see a very large increase in interest past this point, right? This increase in interest is most likely just because of the merger. But if we see something past this, if we ever see this graph going up again, I expect that it will subside over the next couple of days, just because people are right now currently trying to figure out what the heck went on with this merger. But over the next couple of days, once this thing subsides a bit, if we ever start seeing a pump up again, and if that correlates with an increase in volume and stock price, that could be the beginning of a new pump up, essentially, in GREE stock because I think it is kind of ripe for it, right? I think this has been pushed down a little bit too much, in my opinion. That's just what I think. But that is what I have for you guys today. So if you've enjoyed the video, feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Other than that, have a great day. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.